Okay, welcome everyone to our very first Q&A and mentorship session. We're so excited to have you here. This is meant to be our time for you. So hopefully you come with questions, with ideas. We're going to share a little bit about ourselves, and we're also going to explore some of the educational resources that we provided in the drop that went out earlier this week. All kind of centered around our monthly theme of what is specialty coffee or what defines specialty coffee. So I'm excited to peruse some of that with you all. But first, I want to take a moment, since it is our first Q&A session, to introduce you all to the team. So if Ivana, you want to kick us off, tell us a little bit about your coffee adventure, what brought you here, and what you do for Raise the Bar.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. My name is Ivana. I'm based in New York City, and my start in coffee was a little bit non-linear in that I originally worked in like advertising and marketing from some time before, and then pivoted into coffee when I really wanted to just be able to work around people that I admire and with industries that I really care about. And coffee has always been one of those. So I've found a really happy place in kind of blending like my marketing skills and now working with like coffee people and brands. And my role at Raise the Bar is overseeing communications, and it's just really been my happy place to get to talk about coffee and try to maybe raise more awareness of specialty and just encourage more discourse and visibility around it altogether. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ivana. I love that. Rachel, you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Hello, my name is Rachel Apple. I was in art school and a barista because I rage quit my family portrait studio job because I was tired of crying at work. And so then I got a job as a coffee shop in 2006. And then I finished my art degrees, but I never left coffee. And so I worked as a barista and a trainer and manager and roaster, and then moved to Boston. I'm from Oklahoma and started in coffee in Kansas City. And then I worked for George Howell doing quality control and purchasing for many years. And through that is when I started working with Cup of Excellence. And I do a lot of judging, and Raise the Bar is something I'm really passionate about because in my almost 20 years in this industry, it was a different landscape trying to learn anything at all. And so when we had the idea to make education our way, I was all in. And so, yeah, that's my journey. That's what drives me here at Raise the Bar.
That's amazing. Thank you, Rachel. I'm Sandra. I also started working in coffee, well, as a barista in college, and that went on for a long time while I tried to do other things, but ultimately I was always working in coffee. And it was that started in 2008, and it was in like 2011 or 2012 that I realized that I could do this kind of full time. I was very lucky to have some really awesome mentors, which we'll get to talk about in a moment. And I started roasting in 2013, 2014, and I became a green buyer. And eventually I worked for a green coffee importer, and I became a Q grader and a Q instructor. And it's just been a really wonderful career path. And I really love this industry, and I love the work that we get to do. And Raise the Bar, like Rachel said, is kind of, it's an exciting opportunity for us to kind of create some of the training that we would have loved to have when we were baby baristas, and to share some of the knowledge that we have accumulated over our decades in this industry, and which I at least can say I'm nerdy enough and excited enough to talk about all the time that I'm excited to have a platform to do that. Since this is was meant to be a Q&A and mentorship session, and since it's our first one, I wondered if we wanted to share a little bit, the three of us, about some examples of mentorship that we've experienced in our career, and how they impacted us or how that support changed our career path. Anyone want to kick us off, or shall I?
I'll go. I was thinking about this earlier, and I think it's easy for me to reach for like George Howell and his daughter Ginny, because I spent so much of my career with them and they're known, but I think I'll skip them and go further back. And one of the cafes that I worked at in Norman, Oklahoma was called Crimson and Whipped Cream, because Norman is like college football, and crimson and cream were their colors, and it was like a really good bakery and coffee shop. And that was 2010 or 11 maybe. So I had been in coffee for like 4 or 5 years, and the late aughts were just such a different, like, it was so cool to be shitty to your customers, you know, like you were like, it was so cool to like know everything and make everybody feel bad that they didn't know it. And it didn't like feel good. It was just like the culture. And the manager that I had at Crimson and Whipped Cream, her name was Kate, and she was so genuine. Kate Gilmore, first of all. And she like taught me, she was the first manager I ever had that was like, it's cool to be nice. Like fuck what those dudes are doing. We don't have to be that way. Like we get to be nice and it's cool. And you know what else? It's okay to like not know stuff. You don't have to pretend like you know stuff that you don't know. She's like, I was in a group, she had like gone to Expo or something that year. I think it was in Kansas City. So it was like accessible. And they were all talking about like clever drippers of the moment, you know? And she was like, I don't know what a clever dripper is. Can you teach me? And like framing it in a, you don't have to like not speak up because you don't know. And I know I had a moment where I hated the clever dripper, but it, you know what? It does it. It does the damn thing. And so I think
works.
my takeaways from Kate were like, it is cool to be nice, and I will not be gaslit by like mustachioed men in aprons. And also it's okay not to know something, and it's cool to get to learn. And I think that like those are things that I've had the opportunity to carry with me for the last 15 years. And I love that. So
That's amazing. Thank you, Rachel. Ivana, do you want to go next, or shall I?
You go next.
I'm happy to. I also have, I'm between a couple. I just mentioned that I went kind of full-time in coffee as a barista in like 2011, 2012, and I was able to work with Selena Viguera, who will be an expert Q&A person in February. She's amazing. And so the mentorship I got from her was really, really incredible, and still impacts me today. And the work that she's still doing today is still so impactful. But actually, I want to talk about another amazing Filipino ate named Kat Malingtapang, who helped me train to pass the Q grader exam in 2014. She, like, kind of coincidentally was connected to Andy Town because there were Filipino exporters who were trying to get their coffee over here. I don't really know. And she used to work for a big like commercial OG roaster in South Bay here. And when I told her that I wanted to be a Q grader, she like went above and beyond to help me. She really wanted to be a Q instructor, and so she took it as an opportunity to like practice teaching Q stuff to me, which meant that I got to go over to her house and do like a bunch of practice tests and a bunch of practice cuppings and a bunch of like tasting things and talking through them with her because she was so generous with her time and so supportive. And it's one of like many opportunities that I've been so lucky to have, because there are women in the industry who want there to be more women in the industry. Kat knew that there were very few Q graders who were women, and even fewer who were Q instructors. And I passed the Q exam on my first try, obviously with some retakes, because that's how it works. But because I had gotten to train with her in her house for like months, basically. And she actually is no longer in the coffee industry. She moved to Chicago and has a big life, I'm sure. But I think about her often because that kind of generosity and open-heartedness and dedication to like making sure that the path is open for the people coming behind you is so amazing and so selfless, and had an enormous impact on me and on my career, obviously, because I went on to become a Q instructor basically thanks to Kat. So really grateful to her, and I hope that we can provide some kind of mentorship like what she offered me. So it's a lot.
That is so beautiful. Okay, well, I would love to share about a mentor I was reflecting on, and funny enough, also a manager, and also a really lovely woman named Beverly Wasner, who's no longer in coffee, but as a manager, she was and we were both working at Onyx Coffee Lab at the time, and they always had so many coffees that they were roasting at any given time, and not necessarily all of them were on the menu, but she, as a mentor, just like always encouraged everybody to like try everything, and that would be just like, didn't matter how you described it and everything, just like to talk about it and encourage everyone to participate in that experience. And I remember that kind of like unlocking so many fun conversations and just making me feel really welcome. And then on top of that, she would bring coffee from so many other roasters too to our bar, which was just really exciting to get to share in the excitement of all of that. And then she took lots of leaps on her own, and I think I found a lot of encouragement in seeing her go after like learning how to roast and going out to judge in competitions, and always kind of like literally extending an invitation, being like, I've got this many more seats in my car, so get in, everybody. And that just was the start of it all.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that it can be as easy as just like offering a ride or saying, I have space available. I don't know. I think it's kind of like activism, right? There can be little microdoses of activism in our daily life, just like there can be little microdoses of mentorship or advocacy in our professional life too. It doesn't have to be just big grand gestures. That's awesome. Well, I wanted to open the floor to see if anyone has questions about this month's theme. Our theme is specialty coffee, and the idea was kind of setting the context for what is specialty coffee, what is the definition, where have we come from, where are we now, where are we going, and also kind of empowering people to realize that they can make their own definitions. So if Rachel or Ivana have anything that they'd like to say about the topic, the floor is definitely open. But our next topic is also if there's any opportunity for mentorship here. Is anyone having specific questions about their career or anything that they want advice on or want to talk through? And this is kind of an open question, right? If ever you're in the Raise the Bar Patreon and you have a question about what to do in your career, feel free to drop it in the chat. Feel free to reach out to us. As you can see, we want to share our resources with our community, so don't feel that you're limited to just participating in the monthly Q&As and mentorships. And I'll put a plug that the VIP tier members actually get quarterly mentorship one-on-one sessions as well. So if this is really something that you want to spend time on, we are here to invest that time with you. But if not, we want to also offer the opportunity to all of our members and all of our community if people have questions about their career. All right, well, the floor is open, but in the meantime, I was thinking that we could explore some of the educational resources that we published in the January educational resources, which is a pretty dense document. And the idea is not necessarily that you have to read all of it or like click every single link. The idea is just if you want to explore the topic more deeply, or if there's some particular topic that interests you particularly, that you have those resources really easily available to you. But there's a couple that I want to spend time with, and so I highlighted them, and we're going to talk through them today. So one is I really want people to know about Erna Knudsen. Yeah, Rachel, what's up?
Can I share an anecdote about her?
Erna? Yeah. Yes.
So I never got to meet her, but I tend to run in older circles in coffee. Like I just kind of have found myself with like upward generations of folks. And so especially in my work, she was a Cup of Excellence judge for a long time, and she was friends with George and Susie Spindler. And so there's just kind of like stories that kick about. And I think this one sticks with me just because it humanizes her so much. Of like, sometimes it's really easy to be like, hey Debbie, these people like coined these phrases or they did these things, and they're kind of a distillation of their actions. And so there's just this story that she was in on a Cup of Excellence jury in 2000, not 2000. I don't know when it was. It was in Guatemala. And the way that you do this, and Sandra knows this now, you go and you cup all the coffees, and then you come back into a room, and then your head judge, it's basically hangs out and like curates conversation. They want to like hear how the coffees were, and you go around and you share all your scores. And sometimes there's always going to be outliers, especially on international juries, some people that like don't agree or do agree, but the things that rise to the top are the ones people are almost always in really strong calibration about. And you share your score. So there was this one coffee that everyone was like 84, 85, and they were talking about 80, 45, and they get to Erna, and she was like, I have a 90 for this. And she just was kind of like one of the most experienced cuppers in the room, and she was just completely out of calibration with everybody. She was like, this coffee is it, essentially. And everybody kind of looked at her like, a 90, Erna? And this was way before 90s were like bandied about. And she looked at her notebooks and she's like, maybe I'm sleeping with the producer, I don't know. Just like, I'm sure she was the only woman in that room. And she was just like so comfortable and so just like witty and funny and like acknowledging. She's like, I am out of calibration, but whatever, this is what the score is. And I just really love that story about her.
Yeah, she's awesome, dude. I'm gonna post the link to this article. And in the article, they quote this story that I'm gonna share, which is that she was given 2 lifetime awards by the SCA, one the first year that they did that in the 90s, and one in 2014. And in 2014, she gave a short little speech that was basically like condensing down, obviously. She was like, yeah, it was pretty cool that I wasn't allowed to cup in those cupping rooms. And at the end of the day, I bought that company from under them and fired them all. And I just think she's a badass. That's just all it is. She also I worked at Royal Coffee, which was owned by Robert Fulmer. And one of the companies she worked for, not the one that she ended up buying, but one of the coffee companies she worked for previously, was owned by his uncle, a different Fulmer. So there's historical lineage here in the Bay Area, as always. So I was thinking that we could read through some like pull quotes from the article. You should go read it. It's by Ashley Rodriguez. And it's kind of like a biographic article about Erna. It's not super long. But we all got to know more about her. So I'm going to read this, which is a quote from Rick Reinhardt, who was the former head or president of the Specialty Coffee Association in the mid-2010s. He says, forget her gender. She was just a really good coffee person, and she had an appreciation for a couple things, shares Rick. At the time, coffees weren't marketed the same way they are now. You couldn't just buy a few pounds of coffee from a particular country And most coffee traders were only interested in selling containers of coffee, 37,500 pounds of coffee or 250 bags, which is what you would probably see when you look over at your local roaster pulling green coffee out of burlap sacks. So to folks who could buy coffee in huge units. For Erna, she wanted to buy just one container of coffee from a specific region and then sell bags of coffee from that container to small roasters. It was especially remarkable. She knew that there was a market for coffees in small lots that were better or distinct from the commercial lots that were trading around her. She knew intuitively that she could make a market for that, and she pursued that market. And that was in itself the breakoff point for specialty coffee. I like this quote because it highlights the revolutionary change that Erna brought, right? There's another article we're going to talk about briefly by Chris Corman from Royal, and he talks about the impact that Peet's coffee had in kind of defining second wave. And if you think about second wave, you're thinking, okay, they finally started naming origins. Like we got mocha Java blends. We got coffee from Sumatra. Indonesia was a huge part of the second wave. But even saying this coffee is from Sumatra, that didn't really exist before Erna decided to cup coffees and realized that Sumatran coffee doesn't taste the same as Guatemala or as Mandheling or as Colombia. And then also decided that she could sell those coffees in a differentiated way to roasters like Peet's here in the Bay Area who wanted to make a product that was slightly more special. I don't know. I feel like I'm not a big ideas person, and this is a huge idea that she had and then she manifested. Yeah, Rachel, go ahead.
Do you know what year that was?
Well, that she started differentiating coffees.
Yeah, because I'm trying to put together a timeline in my head, but I just didn't know what.
She first used the phrase in a publication in 1974, the phrase specialty coffee,
Yeah.
but Peet's was founded in 1966, and she was already cupping and working in green coffee. Well, I think she actually started in the 40s or 50s, but she wasn't allowed to do stuff until probably the 60s. And by the 70s, she had her own firm.
So the reason I was asking is because I know that George Howell started coffee. It's his 50th year of him being in coffee business, but I think 1974 he was in California, and
Big year.
He was so inspired by Peet's, and he actually was kind of a failed art trader of Huichol Mexican yarn art. He grew up in Mexico City. It's a whole different thing, but nobody was interested. But he was so inspired by Peet's and beatnik coffee and second wave coffee, and the beginning of that he took the concept and went back to Boston where he had been before, and he tells the story of him and Lori, his wife, and their 6 kids in the back seat of the station wagon, and taking his Peet's coffee and his hand grinder and his French press, and stopping at gas stations and making little coffee all the way back to Boston. And I think because of Peet's and Erna in the Bay, it started George Howell, and he was the first one to start putting roast dates on bags, period. And he also was the first one to kind of take what Erna did with separating out origins and then the micro lots. He was the one going to producers of where the fuck is this coffee from? He would go cup with them and then notice the lots on the table and then requested those to be held out and then offered higher price points for that in the 70s and in the 80s. And that wouldn't have happened without what she did, you know? So it's always someone giving something and then building, and it's just beautiful.
Building that momentum. Yeah. Peet's is definitely an important player here in the evolution of specialty coffee. And it's right around that time that we have Royal Coffee was started in the 70s as well. The Specialty Coffee Association of America was founded in it was in the early 80s. yeah, it's like this movement that starts in the 60s and keeps kind of developing until we get to, well, today, I guess. I have one more quote from Ashley's awesome article. Does someone else want to read this one? Ivana or Rachel?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yay.
Okay, so this quote, Yutsun never played by the rules, no matter where she went. She had a regular table at a place in downtown San Francisco called Jack's, known then as a men's club, and would invite new coffee professionals, many times women, to sit with her and share their stories. She was very curious about me because I was so young and I was at this table with these total rock stars. Here's Cade Whalen, who is now a senior VP for Inter-American Coffee, but got her start at Sabreos at Elon Organics.
I wanted to share this one because Katie still is at Inter-American, and she's a friend of mine. They're based, her office is in San Diego, but she also mentions at the end of the article that Inter-American US is 75% women now, and that's largely because of the impact that Erna had on people like her when they were very young in their careers. So again, kind of harkening back to this idea of mentorship, where it's one person trying to open a door for one more person, or identifying that it's been hard for them and that they want it to be easier for people down the line. And here we have a really clear example of how impactful that was with real numbers. It's crazy that Inter-American has such a woman-heavy office. And apparently, Katie says it's thanks to Erna. That's pretty cool. Anything that surprised you about these quotes or about her story, or are there any lessons that we can learn from Ms. Knutson?
I think it's what you just said, right? Like, we all got to walk through doors. I mean, even the people in this chat, right? Right now, there's like no men present, right? Like, and all of the doors that were open, maybe they were like 2 or 3 generational doors back, but the fact that like what change can happen when you invite people in instead of like keep people out, and like all of the fruit that that can bear generationally is dope.
That's awesome. Thanks, Rachel. All right. Well, if we want to move on, I have one more resource I wanted to explore with y'all. This is from my former colleague, Chris Corman. And he published this in 2023. So for context, it was after the FCA had released their new definition of specialty, and they had released the beta version of the CVA, but nothing had happened with CQI, nothing had happened with Q graders. This was all sort of like percolating in the background. But this is part of what I want to highlight. Something he talks about is that specialty is differentiation. And what does that actually mean? What are we differentiating? So he says, today, commodity grade Arabica coffee is defined by how it is sold, not how it cups. The Intercontinental Exchange, ICE, the owner and operator of Global Exchange and Clearinghouse Markets, tracks coffee's C market futures Arabica contracts from 20 deliverable origins to 8 delivery locations during 5 contract series months at a size of 37,500 pounds. And it aggregates trading activity to publish the world benchmark for Arabica coffee. I really like that we're pointing out explicitly that there is actually no real definition for commodity coffee. The definition is simply that it's traded on the C market. I'm posting the link to this article in the chat here. And one thing that we talked about a lot in Q, especially when we're thinking about how CQI kind of evolved, was that the assumption then is that there's probably a lot of coffee traded on this market that could qualify as specialty. We have clear definitions for specialty. We don't have clear definitions for commodity other than that it's traded on this market. If we were to analyze some of these coffees, maybe we could remove them from the commodity market and move them into the specialty market. And here I just have a snapshot of the C market for the last 6 months. As you see, we've experienced quite a bit of volatility. And honestly, I feel like this last 6 months looks more stable than the last year. Yeah, I don't want to get too derailed by the C market, but I want to make sure that we're talking about coffee in the global context because it is traded as a commodity. Ivana, do you want to read this quote for us?
Yeah, sure. And I have always, just before reading it, I wanted to say, like, commodity is so interesting that it doesn't have as, I guess, clear or specific as a definition as specialty does, and I've always wondered. So very cool. Okay. So, the defining nature of most commodities is their fungibility. The market recognizes no difference in commodity coffees from Tanzania, Papua New Guinea, or Mexico. Commodity beans are traded without the inclusion of a farmer or cooperative's name, an indication of any flavor notes or cup score or any other distinctive properties other than the boundaries established as standardization mechanisms. In other words, bean size, allowable defect counts, etc. The products are valuable because they are interchangeable, recognizable specifically as baseline coffee, and nothing more. Thus, specialty grade coffees, if there can be any definition we can all agree on, must be distinctive in some way or another, in a way that adds value above and beyond the base layer of commodity coffee. In this, the SEA has roundaboutly hit the nail on the head.
Isn't that fun? What do we think about this quote?
I mean, it makes me think of, I'm always kind of thinking of how we move coffee, and it's something that we've talked about a lot the last several years is with like the increase in access to information and like producers from different countries getting to have like WhatsApp with each other and like this proliferation, that's my new word. I can't even say it now, proliferation of access to each other and like learning. There's been an increase in coffee quality. I think like across the board, a lot of like consistency and things like that. And there is even more like specialty coffees, but they're all stuck moving in commodity systems. And we don't have frameworks for trading that is different from the two. And so I think it just doubles down on the like our definitions are so nebulous anyway, but they impact like every piece and nook and cranny of our industry. But it's like it's a puzzle that I think is still actively being solved of how do you treat specialty special instead of like relying on decades old systems of just like moving like grain, right? And that's what it made me think about.
Nice. Yeah, Ivana.
It's making me think, like, are just commodity and specialty coffee enough? Like, there must be so much more ways to like define and talk about and like think about moving coffee through the world. So that's,
I think Maxwell, is he the one that wrote The Business of Coffee? Maxwell Collin Dashwood?
I don't think he is. I think it's the other
He
guy.
Co-wrote I know he co-wrote The Water for Coffee, but there's Business of Specialty.
Yeah.
It's just in the other room right now. He opens his book by talking about these like the expansive definitions of that one.
It's by Colin Harmon.
Colin Harmon.
Yeah.
Then that's not what I'm talking about. No, the white one with the yellow and the green kind of splotches on the front. I think that one's what I know about running a cafe. I'll find it.
That's right.
But I think it's called The Business of coffee. But he talks in that book about like differentiations of specialty and commodity, and he basically is like, for the use case for this book, we'll be using boutique coffee, because it's kind of like, it frames that what a lot of the spaces that we work in and we were all baristas in and bought coffee, roasted coffee for, have an even more carved out space within specialty, because right now McDonald's has all Arabica coffee, right? Like right now Dunkin' has all Arabica coffee. And so it's technically specialty coffee, or at least some of it that they're purchasing, but it's a different model than like the niche corner of the specialty world that we all function within. And so he uses the word boutique. And I never decided if I like agreed with it or not, but yeah, the McDonald's and Dunkin' too, their QC in purchasing is remarkable.
Height.
Yeah.
But really,
I'm gonna find this book. I can't leave right now, but I'll find it and drop it in the chat.
Yeah. So I like that we're talking about like the business aspect. And Ivana, to your point, I feel like that gap that you want to see addressed, I think that third-party certifications try to address it, right? So we have fair trade organic, we have Rainforest Alliance or Bird Friendly, or all these that kind of that either an economic price floor and or a like collective environmental responsibility and build it into the product. And I think in the last 5 or so years, we've kind of fallen out of love with that system. People don't like third-party certifications or don't feel that it solves this problem. But at the end of the day, like coffee needs to get sold. And most coffee is at the end of the day sold on the C market. Well, you were right. It is Maxwell Cullen Dashwood, right?
It was.
Maxwell
I think he's just more
Dashwood,
known
yeah.
for his water.
Yeah.
More known for his water
Yep.
than this, but it's a good book. But you know what he doesn't do? He doesn't credit Erna Knudsen for terming specialty. And I've been waiting until I see him in person to bring it up. Because
does he credit someone else, or he just doesn't mention it?
No, he doesn't mention it, but I think he talks about other people and like how he might even talk about Trish, but he doesn't talk about Erna. And he's sitting there defining. I had a whole email written and I was like, you know what, this is an in-person conversation. So that was like, that's my critique of that book so far.
You got to remember the people that came behind us, you know? So these are the questions that I had for this thing. I was curious about how many people in our community are already familiar with the C market. So maybe we can ask that question in the chat later. And I feel like we've been talking about how do we quantify what makes certain coffee specialty in the context of this globally traded commodity. And I think that that's just the ongoing conversation, right? Rachel, Ivana, do you want to add anything else? Awesome. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I wanted to leave you with at least one tool. So I thought that we could take a second and actually pull up one of the definitions in the sensory lexicon. This is available for free for download. And I have the link. One moment. Here it is. It's a PDF, so you have to download the PDF, and I highly encourage that you do. And I thought we could look at this one. I chose it at random, and we can choose another one. I wanted to talk about vegetative because I love the definition. Sharp, slightly pungent, aromatic associated with green plant or vegetable matters such as parsley, spinach, or pea pod. Vegetative, I feel like, is one of those descriptors that people use pretty broadly. And so and it's also like a really important descriptor. A lot of people react quite strongly to having vegetative notes in their coffee. So having a concise description of it feels like such a huge advantage. And I don't know that this is quite how I use this. Like, I guess what I'm saying is that this definition actually sounds a little more positive than what I usually mean when I say vegetative. But here we have a way to calibrate. So we're getting canned asparagus, apparently, and we're going to prepare it this way. And we can sniff it or taste it. And the intensity of this preparation is a 6 out of how many points? 15. So it's actually not very intense, this preparation. This preparation is like less than half of the possible intensity of vegetative. Yeah, any thoughts, comments?
I usually say vegetal, not vegetative, just the colloquial difference. But for me, like a reference point is pea pod is the only one that was resonant at all, I think. And I think of it more like celery. But I also just think of like if you just put a green bean in your mouth and like that flavor, because often we're using it to talk about roast or like underripe and the things that you that are qualities from that bean. And so if you're trying to decide if you taste the green bean, just like to me, taste the green bean.
You mean the raw coffee?
Yeah,
not green beans.
Not green
Awesome.
beans. But yeah, to me, it's not. There's like herbal and like the herbal floral and like those other things that are green things that are more pleasant or positive attributes. But to me, vegetal is certainly not that.
Yeah.
And
Isn't it
asparagus.
fun that they also have definitions for dark green and herb-like? We can get as specific as we like.
Yeah.
That is
Sorry, I
so
wasn't trying to
interesting
fight
to
with the
me.
lexicon, just like sharing my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I find the asparagus canned asparagus like as a, I guess, mild or moderate level of intensity to be a really interesting choice.
Well, so it's 1 tablespoon of just the liquid from the can and 3 pieces of asparagus. And then you just sniff it.
There's a question. Elizabeth asks, what about olive-like flavor? Is that something you would say is vegetative, or do you think that's in a different piece of the lexicon?
Oh, let's find out. Oh, olive oil is a flavor. No.
What's different for me, I guess? I don't
Yeah,
know. Elizabeth, what do you think it's like a green olive, a black olive, like a nice olive, or like a not so nice olive, or olive oil? What are we talking?
It was like a green olive, and it kind of like astringent, like I would say kind of like a pickled olive was kind of like reminiscent of that flavor wise and smell wise.
Like a Castelvetrano, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
So I do feel like olive oil, especially for Castelvetranos, might work.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's
and
probably
then maybe we could go back to the wheel. This would be a great place to use the wheel, which I don't have up at this moment. Because we could work outwards from the wheel. All right, I'm going to look it up.
Have you done much work with the coffee rose from Level Up sponsor Cafe Imports?
I wouldn't say I've done much work with it, but I have used it somewhat.
Yeah, I've like lightly poked around and used it a little, but I didn't know if maybe they had a different olive note.
They might. I'm just trying to find the flavor wheel on my computer or anywhere else.
And also, as we
here we go.
As Sandra looks up olive, is there any like specific questions that y'all were hoping to have answered today, or that have come up through this that we can spend the last couple minutes talking about, since you're here live with us? Yeah.
I had a question. If you, and this kind of like reminisces back to the conversations that y'all were having about like mentorship and all of that. If you for those that are Q graders, if you could start your journey over, like what steps would you take now to become a Q grader?
Sandra, I think that's you, because I chose to let mine lapse after the change. So I think Sandra is much
You had
more.
already,
You've been.
you,
Well,
you
I'm
had
not.
already taken the CVA thing, though. You can update it at any time. Yeah. I don't know that I have an answer for you, Elizabeth. I think my advice would be to cup more coffees with more people and practice talking about those coffees with that panel. Practice using tools like the sensory lexicon or the flavor wheel to improve your vocabulary and your communication, your ability to communicate effectively about coffees, and cup all different kinds of coffees so that you're also widening your library. If you want to become a Q grader, there is a new Q combo from the SCA, and you can certainly sign up for it. I feel like I'm not today going to tell you that that is the best path forward, but if you want to do that, it is a great resource that you certainly can have access to.
Yeah, I think one of my pieces of,
Yeah.
I guess I have a couple of thoughts. Candidly, I need to be careful with my language that I use right now and answering. But I worked in coffee for 15 years before I got my Q because I had kind of a different path, and then it was when other people could pay for it. But it was still before the merger and the updates. And I think the things that were skill sets that I had and were just sort of proven out in the process were things that came through more like tasting, like Sandra says, but even like making your own solutions of like salty, sour, sweet, and doing like different intensities of tasting because you become more perceptive, even in like the mouthfeel difference between like sugar, like sweetness and salinity has like a little bit of a mouthfeel difference. And sometimes at really low ratios, it's hard to even like get the flavor. So it's like a lot of practice of like even just tasting citrus notes. And like when I built out my first job with George Howell was building an education program. And one of my favorite things, I would do flavor wheel, taste the flavor wheel. And I would take a section and we would do like all citruses and like just doing the difference in like the smelling of the oil and tasting side by sides and doing really intentional tastings of things that aren't coffee really feeds into the skill sets that you're working on and building of what the Q used to be. So I think that's what I would focus on. Yeah, is tasting, like cupping, tasting things intentionally and thinking about, I talk about this in barista too, of like, we talk about like acidity and bitterness and balance and eating a strawberry, right? Like you're going to have acidity and sweetness, but also the flavor of a strawberry. So however ripe it is, you might have more sweetness, or however underripe it is, you might have more acidity, but it's always going to have the flavor of strawberry. But if you're just like snacking on strawberries, you might not always be thinking about it. So just like slowing down and being like cognizant of what's happening, that actually like builds the pathways in your brain to where it makes it faster when you cup, that you're like, oh, this for me is that reference.
That's right. That's great advice. All right, before we close out, I want to take us through this flavor wheel because we had the question about olive. So we would start with green vegetative, right? We think that olives are green, and then we can get more specific. We have options of green vegetative or beanie or raw or olive oil. And if we stuck with green or vegetative, we have all of these more specific options, which are underripe, pea pod, fresh, dark green, vegetative, hay-like, or herb-like. And so while the lexicon isn't going to have every flavor or descriptor in the world, we can use it to be as specific as possible with this language that everyone has access to. So in this case, I think if we tasted olives and we wanted to use the lexicon, I would probably go with green vegetative and then olive oil, and I would end it there. Does that sound right to you, Elizabeth, or would you have described your experience differently?
No, that makes a lot of sense. It was definitely like I actually just went and got up and tried some olive oil.
That's perfect.
I would say, yeah, that's very similar.
That's awesome. Very cool. So
That's
yeah,
the
it's
best.
not.
I mean, just keep doing that. Yeah.
Yep, that's perfect. Yeah, so Lexicon isn't going to have everything, but it is a pretty useful tool, IMO. And it doesn't mean that you can't use words that aren't on the wheel. In fact, you should. But I think that skill of like being able to be as specific as possible with my personal vocabulary and also know how to translate it into this more universal vocabulary of the lexicon is a really important skill, especially if you want to continue honing your cupping. Well, that takes us to the end of our time. Any last questions or comments or thoughts, parting wishes? Awesome. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much to those of you who joined us today. I hope that you continue to join us and that we have more and more people joining month over month. If you have any questions or feedback or thoughts, please feel free to put them in the chat in Patreon or to message us directly. We're just so stoked to have you here and so stoked to be able to talk about coffee with you.
Thanks,
Awesome.
y'all. See you later.
Bye, y'all. Take care.
See you
Bye.
next time.